So we are here for our fortnightly roundtable with, up in my top corner, the beautiful Brice from Esoteric Atlanta in Atlanta, the beautiful Medyhne from Australia, and as usual, poor David Cowan, it's 5 o'clock in the morning from him, so he will pop on as and when he turns his computer on and if his alarm clock's gone off. So ladies, let's start with you, Brice. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Interesting times we're living in, so I guess what's that? There's a quote, and it might have been Dolly Parton who said this. I don't know if she's bad, but I never wanted my life to be boring, and sure isn't. So
Oh, that is so spot on. That is so spot on, and that's what I love is, despite all the shit show from coming from various different directions, we can still laugh about life and appreciate the good things. What about you, Medyhne? How are things with you?
Well, to be transparent, it's been a challenging week, even a couple of weeks. There's a lot of things that have come up to work with. I mean, completely from left field. How's this one? My one of my relatives who passed over, she came in and she put on the TV downstairs and the light downstairs, and then I got a friend who's like a medium to bring her through, because she obviously wanted to speak to me, and she wanted to apologize to me because without me realizing it, she was feeling insecure and creating division within my family, and trying to separate people and cause division. So she wanted to come back and apologize. So that was really from left field, and I was really quite shocked actually, because I didn't know that was going on. But on the other side, obviously she had a different perspective, and she felt badly about it, and she wanted to get my forgiveness for that. So that was very interesting.
I'm going to have to giggle out loud, because this is very apt in terms of the fact it's never too late to apologize.
Thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, interesting.
Say no more, but no, in all seriousness, I won't go into details as to why, but I think there's always these lessons that are coming up, and I love the way you introduced that, Medyhne, in terms of the fact that you didn't say, oh, my life's shit. You said there's things that have come up to work on, and that makes all the difference to me in terms of how you approach these things. And I've got myself in trouble my whole life through laughing at inappropriate times, because it's the way I deal with certain things. But sometimes I do laugh at very inappropriate times, and it's just a sort of release for me. But yeah, I think I've had a lot. Brice and I did was one of my favorite chats with you yesterday, Brice, on love and impromptu Valentine's. And what had prompted that for me is a really good friend had died suddenly, and we were just talking a bit about this off camera. And at the memorial service, both the vicar and his wife and his other family members did the most beautiful tribute to anyone that I've ever heard. And I don't think there was a dry eye in there, because it was so poignant. And whereas you're remembering that person and everything they said was true, there was no sugarcoating, it was true. This person really was the most positive, uplifting. One of his mottos is, there's never a wrong time to have champagne. So I drank a lot of champagne in his remembrance this weekend, because he just saw the best in everything. But also it was a real reminder to myself, and I think most of the other people in the congregation, and I've spoken a lot about it with my husband, is just the fact that it is never too late to say you're sorry. It's never too late to reflect on things and to be a better version of yourself.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Yeah. I Tuesdays are my long days on the Dark Outpost with David, and we were talking before we started filming that everybody knows my day job is teaching traditional yoga. And David wanted me to go through the Yoga Sutras to prove that yoga is not demonic, basically. So we're reading through the sutras. And today we spoke a lot about, from the second pada, the sadhana pada, about the ego. And basically the ego is what the seer, Purusha, sees of the self, which is a false illusion of the self. And there's a cheesy thing that people say ego is edging God out. And it's so funny when we were talking about love yesterday, and this whole idea of apologizing, how many people let their pride get in the way of actually bridging a gap between something that's happened. You know, it's sad. It's sad because I'm sure many people have lost people in their lives that because of pride they were not able to make that communication on this side of the veil. But good thing you are attuned to that, Medyhne, so you got to communicate.
And there's no way that I wouldn't accept that apology too, because because it's like, you know, when someone comes to you, especially from the other side like that, you know, you go into a state of grace that you have to understand the higher perspective and come from that, you know, the sort of the light of God, where I couldn't not give an apology to them for that, you know, and I had a few people say, well, I wouldn't have done that, but I don't know how you could not, because, you know, in the same way that you would want to be forgiven if you'd done something wrong, you need to do it to someone else. So yeah, it was a very interesting situation. Yeah.
Hi, David. Hello, David. Good morning.
Hi, David. Hi. How lovely to see you. We've only just started and we've just been going through our week and just talking about Medyhne had a lovely experience where someone from the other side came in and apologized, and we were just
right.
how powerful that is. It's just beautiful. Really lovely.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It takes a strong person to do that.
Yeah.
Well, when you always know, like, no matter how bad the situation is, I know we've all experienced it, when someone in your life has apologized and you can feel like, you can really feel whether they're actually sorry, and they in that empathy and that compassion and that really wanting you to understand that they know what they did was wrong, versus the I'm sorry, but that stuff I'm done at that point. Like, that's not an apology. But you know, speaking of ghosts, I'll tell you guys something, or coming from the other side. So down here in the deep south, everything's haunted. So most of us are not afraid of ghosts down here. But the Yogashala at Shanghai, Atlanta, we have a ghost there, and it's built on top of an old Civil War battleground. Like, you see the plaques everywhere, but of course they built these buildings up, and we call him Tom. Don't know if that's his real name, but Thomas sounds like a good name from the 1800s, so we call him Tom. And his boots, you hear his boots walking around throughout practice, and it's an intelligent haunting because you can actually communicate with him. But I often wonder, like, what is he thinking? Like, especially year 2022, and he's from like the 1860s, and he's seeing these girls in these spandex with their legs behind their head. Like, what is this? No wonder he doesn't want to walk into the light. Like, this is way better for him to watch this than to go into the light. So
what a culture shock.
I've made it very clear that when I pass out of this body, I'm going to have great fun coming back. I really am. I'm I'm not saying I'm looking forward to it and wishing that forward, but also just, I just think this is all fascinating. And I just think, I know certainly when I do communications with an animate, it makes no difference whether they're dead or alive. And I can still picture my husband's face when an animal communicator that he was completely skeptical about came in and communicated with one of our dead cats and told him things that you could not possibly make up. And that was just one of, you know, when they talk about life-changing moments for people, because suddenly your whole perspective of the world and things that he'd never even thought about before as being possible just opened up beautifully. And I think, you know, certainly all of us in all of our discussions, one of the joys for me has been having these discussions about things that we think are, or that we've been taught are true. And I know you want to talk about one of these today, David, and then sort of thinking, well, actually, hang on a minute, let's look at this a bit closer and see, what do we really think what's going on?
For sure.
You want to talk about your subject you want to talk about today, David?
Yeah, Brice and I touched on this in our video last week, and that was the theory of evolution, and it is a theory after all, isn't it? It's not called the fact of evolution, which kind of pretty much says it all for me. But I wanted to get your thoughts on it. For my opinion, it sounds kind of a little bit, I don't want to use the word stupid, but I might use the word stupid. it sounds pretty stupid, doesn't it? Like just the idea that something could be one thing and then turn into something else and then turn into something else and then turn into something else. And not once have we ever seen that ever happen, ever.
I used to say that. I used to say that as a kid in school when we were learning about this. I was like, but where are they now? Like, or is there not a place where there's like half man, half monkey? Like, where are they now? And the teacher would be like, it's okay, just learn your stuff. So I get what you're saying. Like, why isn't it still happening? Like, why aren't we seeing this happen? Like, hocus pocus. Like, why aren't we seeing this happen like in our world today? Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think we are though? So take dogs. Okay, let's take a really easy example like dogs. Now, a lot of the breeds of dogs that people have now didn't exist before. And by selective breeding, because one of the things that fascinates me when you raise this, David, is evolution, the theory of evolution from the start, or the practice of evolution on an ongoing basis. And what I mean by that is, like, most people can understand selective breeding, whether it's a genetically modified crop or a pug dog or versus a Great Dane. You know, those breeds are completely man-made through selectively breeding. And the definition of selective breeding is that a man-made decision to breed certain things. But we have seen that selective breeding does change things over time, but equally, a tadpole turns into a frog, and it doesn't take millions of years for it to do that. It takes weeks.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think that. I mean, obviously, there are many animals that over time have perhaps grown claws or something, or sharper teeth or something, but they haven't turned into completely new species. You know, like.
You know,
it's another example of the inversion of reality that's been presented to us to suit a certain agenda, you know, and to keep us dumbed down. That's my version. I mean, we have a galactic history where we're part of 22 different DNAs of galactic beings, and that's where we've come from, you know, and that's all been hidden from us because we are being purposely kept disempowered from the true potential of who we really are, which is infinite divine potential. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, so this is interesting because I've been looking well, a lot of my real waking up started with looking at blood types and being Rh negative, and like learning about all these things that are just, I thought were weird quirks, actually come down to not having the rhesus factor in my blood. And it's interesting. I don't know if it was Cliff High. There was somebody kind of talking about, and it led us to the discussion of the fall of Atlantis, which happened a lot closer to from what we're learning, actually happened a lot closer to where we're living now than we were taught it was, if it even existed, because some people don't even think it actually existed. And there was this thing, this belief, especially coming from like the Cassiopeans, that I know, Catherine, we've talked about this, what we're experiencing now is like karma from what happened when Atlantis fell. And the Noah's Ark story, all that kind of stuff is coming back from that fall of Atlantis, which was actually what we're learning was the apocalypse. And so what we know was happening then in Atlantis was the same thing was happening now. They had all this technology. Apparently they were more advanced than we are now. And they were learning how to genetically modify humans. Well, if you go, we know that that group is doing that now anyway, but this was back in Atlantis. And so there's a belief is that's when they started injecting the rhesus factor into human DNA and blood to try to change it, to try to take away maybe some of those galactic abilities that might be more presentable in someone that doesn't have which is why only 15% of the world is Rh negative. Well, anyway, so after Atlantis fell, because it polarized negative, so it had to fall, we're all back. They believe that throw things off my desk. We're karmically coming back because we were there the first time. And the people that did the changes to human beings are now the ones that are getting this and now having to leave, because that's just one of the theories out there. So it's interesting you said that, Medyhne, because that is something that has been talked about this week. Does that make sense? I don't know. It makes sense in my head.
It does. It does. It's actually very synchronistic, Brice, because I just did had a healing on myself for Atlantean, the Atlantean incarnation that I had, which was from the crystalline Atlantis. And what happened was at the end of the civilization, there was like a sonic boom that was created, and it was by more of the beings that were wanting power, and they created this sonic boom, and it went through the whole civilization, and it destroyed the whole civilization. And I had this pain that kept coming off and on at the back of my head. And what happened was, when the sonic boom happened, there were shards of glass because it was very crystalline, that just smashed and went everywhere, and had this shard of glass go in the back of my head. So I had to have that removed, and to take away this pain. And then the pain just completely went, and it's gone now. And that was a leftover from, the Atlantean crystalline destruction, that moment of destruction when this sonic boom happened. So that was just in the last week.
I think that's what I've always said, that, I know I was always in Atlantis, and I'm pretty sure that sonic boom is what destroyed my eardrums.
Yeah.
Have you also heard about how, and I'm pretty sure it's related to Atlantis, but people say to other places at all, about how the Earth used to be much more silica based rather than carbon based, and now we're finding all the medicinal properties of silica, and because it's so abundant in not just the human body but all living bodies, and really needed for regeneration and repair, but also for toxin removal and everything. So going back to understanding the importance of the silica in our ecosystem and in our bodies, going back to that time, is really, really important to counteract some of the nefarious environmental toxins that have been pumped into us and around us.
That's interesting. Well, I know David and I were talking about the giants, and I know I said when David and I were talking, I had, it's like over a year ago, one of my subscribers wanted me to look into them, to do a deep dive into them. And I've been honest, I was not looking forward to doing this deep dive, because the only thing I knew about giants was from like Bible stories, the Nephilim. But when I started researching into it, I actually ended up doing like 2 parts, because there was so much information. And one of the most astounding things to me, besides the fact that apparently there are giants still in stasis, that's quite terrifying, but is that all these archaeologists had like submitted these bones, 25 feet high people, like these bones, to the Smithsonian, asking for help, for funding to continue this research. And all these lawsuits had been filed against the Smithsonian, because when the Smithsonian took in the evidence, they incinerated it. And literally, in one of the court cases I looked through, their literal defense was, we have to preserve the narrative. Well, what narrative is that? It's evolution. Because if all these scientists are out there saying, hey, we've got all these bones all over the world of people that were literally 25 feet tall, it's not just a one-off, like they're everywhere, then we need to reevaluate this. And the Smithsonian was like, no, we're just going to burn this and get rid of it, and we're just going to keep selling this idea. But it also goes down to this idea, and I know like most of us are animal lovers, so I'm not saying that monkeys aren't important. I think all animals are important. I think sometimes animals are a little bit more evolved spiritually than we are anyway. But if you tell a human being, first of all, that they're just floating out in the atmosphere and their whole planet was just some accident, and then you also tell them that they're actually an accident too, that they just kind of turned into a human from a monkey, then it depowers people. Like you were saying, Medyhne, like to understand our true history, our true galactic history, what can we actually do? They tell us we have 97% junk DNA. I call BS on that. Nature doesn't make junk. God doesn't make junk.
Right.
David, don't you also think that the fact that they try and tell us that evolution is fact is the biggest red herring for me out? Because anytime they try and push a narrative on you and shut down the discussions, then that really signals alarm bells for me.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense now. Obviously, the more aware you are, the more it makes sense that would be the case. The same can be said for climate change, but it's interesting about the giants is because you can see these. Sometimes you don't even have to dig to find evidence. You can see rock formations that are people lying down, and you can see heads coming out of the ocean floor and whatnot, things like that. And also, which is really interesting, is enormous mushrooms in animals. Like, oh, you've got your cat. It's a huge cat.
Wants to join in because he's a giant.
He is a giant. And huge, mushroom-shaped rocks and woolly mammoth-shaped rocks. I mean, it's just not a coincidence, really, is it? You see all these crazy things out there, which is, it's completely fascinating. I just don't know why more people haven't picked up on it when they see things like that, you know.
Indoctrination. And it's also just easier. I think a lot of people in our humanity just would rather learn what they have to learn, get through school, work their 9 to 5, come home, crack open a beer, watch the game, go to bed. You know, I think that either you have to have one of those like moments in your life, changing moments in your life that make you reevaluate your purpose and who you really are, or you're born with a sense of wonder, because I guess there are just a lot of people out there that just don't care. You know, they just don't.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess it brings up fear, and it's confronting when it's something that they don't really understand, or human beings don't like the unknown, you know, what they haven't really control over, or they really like the status quo to stay the same. So I think
they'll hold on to it for as long as they can.
Yeah, exactly. And it pushes them into through their fear zone. And I think, you know, when we transmute the fear that comes up with this, you know, that's really powerful for humanity and individually as well, because that's what we're all doing. We're all currently transmuting fear through this whole, you know, new process we're going through the transition of the earth into fifth dimensional realm. And so, yeah, it's just part of that process that we have to face things that we don't understand and that we don't know, and that we can't always have the full story on everything, because you know, we're not God, we're not the divine. I mean, we are God, but we don't have that higher perspective where we have the whole picture, which would be fantastic. I'd love that, but we can't do that. So yeah, we just have to accept what we can and just be open to be constantly able to reevaluate things and look at things in different ways from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Does any of that tie into the 144,000, like maybe what you were saying, Brice, about the people that didn't inject the thing?
There's a lot of theories on that. The newest one that I've been researching is the splitting of souls from the start of the apocalypse. Oh, where did Catherine go? Oh, we lost. Oh. Okay, guys.
She's the host.
She'll be back. Yeah, no, I just got told I was the host, so.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those days, because Tuesday, by the way, is the day of Mars. It's also the day of Hanuman, which is like the war day. So Tuesdays are always very interesting. When I found that out in India, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Tuesdays are always very interesting. Actually, my teacher in India, because it's the day of Mars, it's the day of battle, he won't like shave his. There you are.
Sorry, that was Idris. This is why I have to remove them off my desk. Because everything they do, he's just knocked out my internet connection. So Brice, you're the only one with the recording of this now.
I know. So I was like, oh,
he really wants all your attention.
I wanted to be like, did Catherine just rapture? Did she just ascend? Like,
it's so funny. Every time I'm doing the recordings, the cats always come and want to join off. But 9 times out of 10, they're then cut off my internet connection. Sorry. So I have no recording of this now.
I'll send it to you. That's fine. No, I was telling them that this makes sense for Tuesday, because Tuesday is the day of Mars, which is the energy of war, which is Hanuman in Hinduism. And I was like, weird things always happen on Tuesdays. And when I learned that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. I was saying my teacher in India won't even shave on a Tuesday because it involves a razor. So like, we're not allowed to give students new postures on Tuesdays because of that. So when that happened, I was like, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday.
Telling me not giving him more attention. One of the things that you were just saying then about people not caring, it did suddenly strike me, and we've talked a lot about this in various discussions about why people not more engaged and more questioning. But if from the moment you start any formal schooling system, or even a lot with parents, if they're busy and working and everything, if everything you're told from the start doesn't make sense, you would stop questioning. I can see why a lot of people would stop questioning. It's just like if you're having a conversation, like going back to what you said earlier, Brice, of a real apology from the heart, or someone, I'm sorry, but it's like, if it's not sincere and you're being fed rubbish right from the start, and something inside of you tells that, I can almost see why people do stop questioning a lot of these things, because they don't believe they're ever going to be told the truth.
Right.
And the system encourages you to not ask questions in a lot of ways, because, you know, teachers get really short with students who ask a lot of questions and sort of question the narrative. They don't actually like that, because it interrupts the whole schedule of what they're teaching, and it causes issues. So, you know, basically kids that ask these things are shut down, and it doesn't fit the system at all. And that's part of the whole robotic programming that we're taught, in order to just be good little citizens and not ask questions.
Well, there's
sorry.
Let's see, with every lie they tell, there's always a glimmer of truth to it. And with evolution, the one thing that is a glimmer of truth that I do believe in is survival of the fittest. It's how our bodies change to adapt to our environment.
Yeah.
And they molded that in with evolution, but that part of it, I believe is true. It's like I just learned recently that blue-eyed people like myself are less likely to be snowblind. That's fascinating to me. They're less likely to be snowblinded. Where did the majority of my ancestors come from? Northern Europe, where it's now, I don't know what to do with snow. I have no idea how to handle that living in Georgia, but it's interesting. So you see these like within the human. Of course, we also have different genetic dispositions from the galactics as well, but also it's from where over time your ancestors are going to adapt to the environment that they're in. And that is the one part that I think is actually legit, because that's how cool God is, that he would give your body the ability to adapt to your environment. But it does not mean we come from monkeys.
Yeah.
But they mixed it in.
Yeah, I think they usually do. I think that they must do that often. They must take something that's true and then just expand it into make it something crazy. So it's got a foundation of truth, but the rest of the building is just built on lies.
I mean, look at have you guys ever been to the Palace of Versailles in Paris? Right?
Yes, I absolutely love that. Oh my God, the fountains and all the incredible sculptures outside just were like fairy tale land. It blew my mind. So
do you
beautiful.
remember the bed, King Louis XIV's bed that you can look at? Do you remember the size of it? It was like it was like a toddler's bed is what it looked like.
They were so small.
Yeah, so even in that sense, like we're not giants, but like no human I know would be able to fit in that bed. So if they're telling us that back in that time they were shorter, then obviously we've grown a little bit taller as humanity since obviously our nutrition got better. Then it's bad now. But you know, like there was some things that changed, so we do get a little. I mean, my grandfather, my dad's dad was 6'5". There's no way he'd be able to fit in that bed, you know? And so that was the king's bed. So you do see a little bit of how we've adapted and changed and evolved, but again, it doesn't mean we came from a different, like you said, David, a different species.
And also that all of this can be manipulated for the good or bad. So if you take genetic engineering and what they've done with that to actually poison us more, basically to make it more resistant to the pesticides and herbicides, so they can get into that cycle. But when you look at rewilding projects where people have gone back from intensive agriculture and returned it back to nature, it's absolutely amazing how quickly the environment can regenerate itself when humans stop interfering. And there's a few really good rewilding projects that we've been involved in around where we live, and it's just beautiful because, you know, however much humans fuck it up, nature has that ability to put it back. And I'm not pretending it's all hunky-dory, because nature can be very cruel from an animal perspective, from a plant perspective. It really is survival of the fittest. I know there's a lot of controversy over that, about whether that's true and whether it's really that competitive, because there is also a lot of herd mentality and sort of for the greater good. But you know, it really gives me a lot of confidence that when humans have manipulated some of these processes, and we're looking at it all the time sort of now, that actually once you take humans out of the equation, nature can put it back pretty well and pretty quickly.
Yeah.
When you talk about survival of the fittest too, it just comes to mind, and you know, don't shoot the messenger because I'm only passing on a story, but there's an amazing lady called Linda McGillis-Good, and she was talking about how with everything that's evolving now with this and that's happening, the beings that are not in terms of survival of the fittest, that are not going to be equipped to move forward in the new energies, are actually exiting this matrix, and they're stepping out, they're going out, they're leaving, because their energy is not in alignment with the new energies going forward. And so that's part of survival of the fittest too, on some level, because the energies that are no longer able to perceive reality in the way that perhaps our consciousness does, to go into the new energies, they're just not a vibrational match anymore for being able to sustain their energy within, the new context.
That's what
How
law of
far
one
would you
says.
take- Sorry, how far would you take that then, Medyhne, on that line of thought about what about them people who choose to eat McDonald's and fast food? Is that any different to people who choose to take that in terms of survival of the fittest?
And again, I feel bad.
I'm just asking, because to me it's the same issue.
Sure. I think it's similar. I think it's all very similar, because these are all free will choices that we're making according to our consciousness, and our consciousness will fit a certain vibrational frequency, which aligns to a certain reality or existence. And so if you're making choices where your body is not being fed properly, or you are doing something to undermine your human potential, you can't go forward in these new energies.
I agree with that. I do think, and I know there's always exceptions to the rules, folks. I know there's always exceptions. And for me, the thing that gets really interesting discussion is, children, animals, people that aren't empowered at that stage to make things. But it's a well-known fact that food choices run through families. You've only got to look at what the Finnish eat for breakfast and what the Brits eat for breakfast. They're completely different.
And it is a soul choice. So even if you're a child, on a soul level, you have still free will soul contracts.
Yeah.
And you're here for a reason. So even though as a child you might think they don't have the same empowerment or ability to make the right choices, there's still soul contracts going on. It's still a free will soul universe. So on some level, it's still the same thing.
Yeah, that's the thing too. So I know, because the Cassiopeans, the law of one, definitely says that when this transfer happens, that not everybody's going to be ascending. It's not everyone's going to be moving on up to fourth density. But it's not going to be like a lottery system. You have made that decision even before taking this life. You made that decision, and according to the law of one, you have to live. I think almost like school. Like you have to have lived so many lives to even be eligible to be harvested, as they call it, to the next density. So a lot of the souls on this earth aren't even eligible. It's like when you graduate college, you have to like petition to graduate. They're not even eligible for that yet, because they're so, people are like, I think we have this idea that having everybody ascend with us is a positive thing, but it's not. It's like taking your kindergartner and then forcing them into like law school.
Exactly.
You would never put a 5-year-old in a calculus class. That's ludicrous. And so for people who are not ready yet, they will exit. And it's funny, Mark Atwood, we were talking about this with Mark Atwood, like he says, like, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but like, I wasn't born when I came down. And I've been noticing now, when instead of saying death, I usually say exit when someone exits, because that the idea of death is an illusion anyway. And so if a soul has already made that agreement that they're not going to move forward into fourth density, then they will exit before that happens. And for some people, that might be that way out, but that doesn't mean if you got this, that you're going to go. That doesn't mean that at all. If you're meant to be here, you're meant to be harvested to fourth density, there's nothing you can do that's going to stop that from coming. You've already signed that contract. You're coming on up. So
I think when you remember too that the planet is the most dense reality in all universes that we could exist in. And I mean, when you really think about that, wow, what does that mean? So for everyone on this extremely dense planet, the densest of the dense realms, you know, how can everyone on this reality have the ability to go forward when you consider that this is the lowest density reality that we could be existing on? You know, it's a huge stretch to think that everyone in this reality is going to be able to have the ability to ascend and go to the higher realms when it is the densest reality. So I think that puts it in context as well.
I've got a question on that, folks. So I just want to know what all your opinions on this. So in all the discussions, and virtually all, to be honest, that I've heard on this, it comes across, and I can see why people would perceive it, that, you know, if you're going to ascend, it's almost like you have reached a higher level, like universe things. But putting it in perspective, okay, just what you were saying about the lowest density and things, we know that at a soul level, we exist and can go loads of other places. That has got nothing to do with being in a human body in Earth. So it just makes me giggle a bit in terms of thinking that the people who are going to ascend to fourth density, that could be a good thing, was actually the other people might be far better off somewhere else. Do you know, it's not like it's not like that's the panacea, is it, of everything? Because we know there's all wonderful things that are nothing to do with Earth.
It's not linear either, and that's the thing. Like, I think sometimes, like you're saying, people think it's it's graduating. So
yeah,
it's not linear though, because there is no finish line. Your soul is never gonna die. Like, there is no finish line. And for some of us, we've already done this before, and we're coming back and going up again. And it's just kind of like this. It's wherever you need to go for your soul to learn whatever lessons you need to learn. So if people who are on the planet right now that are about to exit because that's their soul contract, it's because I believe we kind of sit down with our guides and, you know, creator, and figure out what's best. And so they decided that for their soul's wisdom, which is not compared with anybody else's souls, it's just their souls, they would exit at this time and then go to another third density for a little bit to learn something else. And again, like the law of one talks about the wanderers, and I'm sure the four of us are wanderers. I'm sure a lot of people in this community are probably wanderers, meaning that we were fifth, sixth density, living in a physical body in fifth, sixth density, and decided to come back to this. And what you're right, Medyhne, I've heard that Earth is like freaking hell. Like, other third density planets, this is like, people are like, ooh, I don't want to go there. like you had to be a brave, ballsy soul to be like, I think I'll try Earth, you know, because it is like all third densities are polarized, but apparently Earth is like mega polarized. So you know, I was fascinated. I just learned that on Venus they don't have thumbs. They don't have thumbs. So I've been fascinated by that. And apparently they just do it all day on Venus. So you could go to Venus.
I heard that as well. Yeah, exactly.
Very different existence than Earth.
I like the sound of that, honestly.
It's about what your soul agreed to. Our souls obviously agreed that we wanted thumbs this life, and we wanted to be here for the battle. So
we wanted to help.
And so it just depends. If somebody isn't ascending, it doesn't mean that they're not like as evolved, speaking of evolution, as evolved as soul, or that it just depends on your plan that you agree to. And there is no freaking finish line. And that's what's so hard for us in a human brain to comprehend, because everything in our dense life has a beginning, a middle, and end, works in cycles. But that's not necessarily how the spiritual world works. And that's hard for us to comprehend that. Like, you think about God or source, creator, never was born, has just always existed.
The universe is infinite. It goes forever and ever. I mean, that's a really hard concept for our brains to wrap our head around.
Yeah.
Especially if we're not really living on the thing we think we're living on, because our understanding of the infinite universe is there was many, many, many planets, many stars, and all that stuff. What if that's not the case? So yeah, maybe the infinite, I don't know, maybe like, are we on an enclosed thing, or are we living on I don't think we're living on a ball, but you know, are we living on something that's just floating in the middle of nowhere? And there are many other things like that. Who knows?
That's a question too, because people are like, what are off-worlders? What are extraterrestrials? do they actually live like out there in the sky like we think? Or are they living in a different dimension in our own reality? Or do they live beyond the wall of Antarctica? Like what are these off-worlders? Like what's the truth behind their existence? It'll really kind of screw your mind up if you think about it for too long, because it's just
Is back here? I'll just ask Idris about that, because he's definitely one. He'll let us know. That's why he wanted to cut the conversation off.
Don't talk about this. So yeah, and the whole firmament thing is wild too. Like the idea that there's possibly a firmament. I'm like, are we living in like a snow globe? Like, is that what is this the truth?
Well, think of it. A rainbow. Rainbows are always round, they're always, and they're not actually semicircles. If you go out far enough, it's a full-on circle. When you look at it from not a human perspective, like with a camera, it's very interesting. And also, I'm sure you guys have seen those videos where that one video where the rocket's going up and then all of a sudden it hits something quite solid and it just stops.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell?
That's a bloody bad project manager, isn't it? Didn't they research if there was a bloody firmament before they built the rocket? I mean, you've got to laugh, haven't you? Really? But
they've done all those. Operation Fishbowl, which is the thing where they shot the nukes into the sky. Have you seen any footage of that? It looks very damning in terms of they're definitely hitting something. It looks like they hit something and it just goes all over the place. Like it's really interesting.
When I did a deep dive into the Pleiadians a long time ago as well, from a viewer request, and I learned about you learn about the stories of like the battles between the Draco and the Anunnaki and the Pleiadians and the Lyrans and all these groups that are fighting, and the Dracos took over the Lyran planet, like destroyed it. And then when they came to Earth, it was like this story of like, okay, we got to close them in to keep them here so we can annihilate them, because at that point they were going everywhere, destroying all these planets. And so when you think about those fables like that, it's like, was there truth to that? Did these off-worlders come in and like close them in on this? And that's why this planet is so dense, is because they closed them in order to eventually annihilate what they needed to, because the other realms, planets, whatever the hell a planet, I don't even know what a planet is anymore, to be honest with you. But what these other places had been so like stripped of any goodness because of these particular races that aren't good, and it kind of makes sense with like the Bible stories you hear. I know when I was reading the Apocalypse of Abraham, which is a missing book of the Bible, they talk about the firmament, and he goes up into all the different layers of the firmament. The fifth firmament is where the planets and the stars live, and that is what God tells Abraham, that the stars and the planets are messengers. Well, that's also the name for an angel, so that's interesting. But then you think about when he describes the Garden of Eden, when he's describing what we perceive to be the devil, Satan, Lucifer, he describes it as a Draco. It's standing up on two legs, and I encourage everybody to go read the Apocalypse of Abraham. He describes it as a freaking Draco. When you're reading it, you're like, okay. And when I was reading, I was like, well, that goes back to the Pleiadian stuff I was researching, where they talked about trying to entrap the Draco and Anunnaki here on Earth, which we know the Anunnaki want the gold. And so that's why the gold's being hoarded at certain locations, mainly that little tiny country inside of Italy where that holographic man lives. You guys know, I don't know if I can say it on YouTube. You guys know what I'm talking about? Where they're hoarding all that gold and not giving it to the peoples because the Anunnaki want it. And so then it all kind of starts to like add up a little bit more, and it starts to make more sense than like evolution does. Like these stories, it's like, okay, this is all connecting the dots here.
Again, don't shoot the messenger. But when you were just saying that, again, I'm trying not to laugh. But when we go back to this thing about the firmament, you can see why, if the Black Hats know or believe something about that, you can see why they think that they need to control the population in some way. And you can see why they've got issues with what's happening to the environment, because if you're in a closed system, it's like if you're in a car and the windows are shut, you're going to run out of oxygen at some stage. So if we're in some sort of thing where there is a firmament over, then that puts a completely different question about why they think about the overpopulation. Well, what they might be meaning is they don't want to let us out of the outside bit because they want the rest of that for themselves. But it does make you realize why they might be panicking a bit.
I wonder if that's part of the ascension too, if the firmament will like shatter.
I heard something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when we apparently when we go to the fourth density, or maybe I don't know the fifth, then it'll disappear. And obviously they've tried to break it before, and there've been photos of pieces. Maybe they've cracked it. I don't know, but maybe it actually regenerates too. I'm not too sure.
I don't know if I'd want to be the one to mess with something that was created by.
I'd prefer disappears to shatters, because I don't want my cats to tread on any glass.
Yeah.
So, I would think it would kind of go outward.
Yeah, but there've been so many films and series about the firmament, haven't they? I mean, again, we know that they always signal these things. So to me, there's starting to be a few bits of the jigsaw puzzle put together, I must say.
Definitely a question mark. I mean, I don't know, and I hate sometimes. YouTube can be kind of hard because you'll say something as an idea you want to talk about, and all of a sudden people think that's what you believe.
I know.
And it's, I think like you guys, I just want to explore these ideas because there's evidence to support these ideas, but it doesn't mean that they're 100% accurate. It's just, these are, if you had told me 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that I would have been even considering the possibility that there's a firmament, I would have laughed at you. You know, so it's just, I think it's like Catherine and I say, the more I learn, the less I know.
And that's where knowledge starts. It's just the exploration of these things and the discussion of them, and then it evolves and it expands. But it has to start with you being able to acknowledge and at least talk about it, and to be able to explore it.
Just have that open mind.
Yeah. Can I mention that I really wanted to get this in today, and I know it's not specifically on topic, but I would like to mention that in what's just happened with the protests in New Zealand and Australia, because I'd like to get the information out there. Is it appropriate to mention now that I had friends that have just come back from the protests, and they've had blisters and sunburn, and their eyes have been damaged. So they've been using, and it's sort of appropriate because we are talking about, energy and everything, but they've been using sonic frequencies, the government and the police, to bombard the protesters. And so, these sonic frequency weapons, in what reality is this acceptable, I wonder, that they're doing this, and I'd like to just point out the fact that this is actually happening, because two of my dear friends just came back, and one of them said when he did welding, he had to put special stuff in his eyes because his eyes, were a bit sort of damaged or something, and he had to put the same stuff in his eyes when he came back from this protest because of the impact of this sonic frequency weaponry that's being used. So yeah, I'm just putting that out there because it's just completely beyond acceptable. So yeah.
It's what's the art of war? Don't never interrupt an enemy when they're in the process of hanging themselves. And I think they're allowing because the whole, from what I understand, the main law of the cosmos, regardless of what planet you're on, what density you're in, is free will and consent. And so we know that they've been telling us things through movies to get our consent. But at this point, it's like they're so drastic to hijack that they're just doing things now. It's like throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. And I think, I've asked God a lot, like, why is this certain thing happening now? Why? And it's like, don't interrupt an enemy when in their process of hanging themselves. This is not going to stand in any jury and any level of consciousness. And so, and there are fourth density negative planets. We're going fourth density positive. There are negative planets that they will then go to. They will have to exit and then go to. So, so I think that's.
I do get that, Brice. I totally get that now. And really, the truth of the matter too is that everything that happens in our reality is a reflection of the collective consciousness. So if we have within ourselves something that's unhealed or wounded, some level of corruption within ourselves, then that's going to be reflected on the outer. So it's all about going inward and healing that within ourselves, that is being reflected back to us in the external. I get that. So yeah, we're constantly doing this dance between the internal healing of what everything that's happening, and then seeing this external stuff and thinking that it is something external to who we are, which in reality it's not. So absolutely, it's a dance.
Yeah.
That's why Brice and I were sort of really focusing on yesterday, and we haven't got time to discuss it today, but perhaps we can include this in our next chat, is about the very triggering word of meditation, because it's amazing how easily as humans we can be drawn to focus on the external rather than the internal. And I do question whether that's the same for other species. You know, I think that's up for an interesting debate as well as to, I mean, I've never heard my cats and my dogs discussing a sitcom, you know. So I think it's fascinating to me, and ties in with other events that I've seen on a personal level this week, is how quickly we can, as humans, despite even ones that are doing loads of work on themselves and are aware of all these topics and having these conversations, how we can be drawn to focus on the external. And I wonder if that's part of the bigger plan.
Yeah, and that meditation comes from that yoga practice, and that is part of the Yoga Sutras. Is are you relying on the external to make you happy when happiness and peace actually come from within?
Yeah, that's really just reflective of the whole way the world is, or most of the inhabitants have lived their lives, isn't it? You know, they go and buy a lot of things, or they go and do a lot of activities or something that to kind of take their mind off of the fact that they, in order to be truly happy, they need to go within. And you know,
it's
people
to do with our eyes. Sorry, Dave, you go ahead. Sorry.
That's right. You know, we are, you know, we all came here for fulfillment, you know, like we all came here to find that thing or whatever it is, the thing that really truly lights us up, and to do that. And we've been distracted in many ways through the school system and through a lot of other ways, you know, to lose focus of that.
Our eyes too are something that in a sense takes us off track. So when we see things with our physical eyes, we think that is everything and that is the reality. But if for example, just imagine that we didn't have eyes and that we had to do everything internally without our eyes, it would change the whole way that we perceive the reality that we exist in. So I think our physical eyes can actually throw us off track, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting you say that, Medyhne, because I've spoken before about the fact that I wear hearing aids. So on a small group like this, I do lip read a lot, and I didn't realize for years I was lip reading. Completely fucked when the masks came out. But you know, it's like when I go into a big social gathering, it's a completely different experience when you have that cut off, because you don't engage so much in the chitter chatter because you can't hear it. So I actually find it quite positive. It's very frustrating at times because I can't hear what other people are saying, but at other times it really makes you engage on much more of a one-on-one and really actively listen to what the person's saying. I think that's why I can be quite annoying when I speak, when I sort of overemphasize things, because I'm so used to lip reading subconsciously every other people that I tend to over gesticulate things when I'm talking to others. But you know, sometimes this shutting off a certain sense, it just highlights the others so acutely.
I think it makes you a great communicator, Catherine. Maybe that was one of the foundations of your communication skills, because you had to navigate all that.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh my goodness, these discussions are just brilliant, aren't they? There's so much fun stuff to talk about. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go on for too long, because I know that for a lot of people over an hour is sort of the limit of what they can spare to listen to things. So let's just go around, starting with you, David. Anything else that you really want to discuss today?
probably, no, it's probably a topic for another time. I think we touched on it before. We talked about the school system. I think maybe we could talk about that another time. What I've noticed is that it's very strange. The school system, on one hand, it's dumbing things down massively, but at the same time, it's also speeding the rate at which the students learn up. So they're teaching them things, more advanced stuff earlier on. And to me, it's kind of just a method of confusing them, at such an early age. But then they're also, like I said, they're dumbing it down. So long term, they're learning less things. It's just really strange.
There must be some strategy in that that we don't really understand of why they've set it up that way. Yeah.
My mother was an early childhood development major, and so she's really fascinating to talk to because she understands how a child's brain develops and when it can accept knowledge. And I remember she used to get, because I went to this school that was like, I mean, private school, but it was like super like college prep. Like I had just so much work. I mean, it was just so much work. When I got to college, it made college very easy. But my mother would get very upset with the school system, even though they were paying for it. She would go in and complain and be like, you're teaching a 14-year-old things a 14-year-old brain cannot comprehend. Like it's not developed yet. So I think you're hitting something, David. Like they are bringing in information too soon for kids, but it's doing something to their brain that their brain is, because their brain's not developed enough to start to understand certain concepts. Does that make sense? Like
Exactly.
I remember my freshman year of high school, 9th grade. So what, you're like 15. My science class, it was biology. The biology textbooks we were using were the same as they used in medical school. And my father got upset. My father was a veterinarian, got very upset about that. They were like, this is not, the stuff that you're trying to have these kids learn is not important for a 14, 15-year-old to learn. Their brain isn't developed yet. It's like before the Federal Reserve stepped in, like I think I said at one point, kids in America from a very young age were learning like Greek, Coptic Egyptian, like all these old languages. Well, Greek, I know people, it's not an old language, but you know what I'm saying? Like where a lot of the manuscripts that we study are written in these languages. And they took that away when the Federal Reserve started controlling education. Well, here in the United States, they then started introducing foreign language to kids in like the 8th or 9th grade. Well, at that point, with the brain's development at that point, because they're like 14, 15 years old, their brain is already fully developed around English. And so to introduce language dumbs them down to the point where still today, I'm pretty good with Sanskrit. I've had to learn, but you can't really converse in Sanskrit, it's a dead language. But like I studied Spanish and French. And if I am going to have to like read something in those languages, I have to translate it in my head first and then think about it. Whereas if you're younger, like kids who grew up in a bilingual home and they learn both languages at the same time, because the brain is developing, it can develop around both languages to create fluid. But it's like they were doing that with kids before the federal. So I think you're onto something, David. There's some mad genius plan into the way they structured education that is very nefarious.
I think you've covered it, both of you, because I think you've covered it because you both said several times the difference between learning and comprehending. And if you fill the brain up with too much learning, you don't allow the space to comprehend. Right. And therefore, I think that's a very successful strategy for them, to fill it up with stuff that you can repeat parrot fashion, but not actually have a discussion, a debate, or really understand. Two fundamentally different things.
Yeah.
Well, also they have a certain curriculum that they have to cover within a certain amount of time, right? But I don't think that very little effort is put into making sure that the student actually learns it. Like they teach it, and then if they don't learn it, they just move on to something else, and there's no time. And it really just causes a lot of problems, in terms of people thinking they're stupid, and it really kind of sets you up for a life of, a lot of people have disdain for learning because they had such a terrible time in school, and that really obviously plays right into the whole agenda, really, of just creating a drone, doesn't it?
How much do you think this is from the parents' perspective? Because as a parent, this has been my pet hate the whole way. So where I am in the UK, there's what's classed as a good school or a bad school, and a lot of it is done on academic achievement, but that is 100% driven by the parents. And if the parents, we have this saying about you vote with your dollars, you vote with your money, whether it's buying food and what you're, or supporting businesses that you want to, but the same is with education systems. So it's very easy to blame the system when a lot of the time it's the parents that are driving the system. And I've been absolutely shocked. When I grew up as a child, my parents took responsibility and didn't expect the school to be all and end all. And now I see so many people that expect to teach their children about everything. Well, where's the parents' role in this?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I think most parents are staining it and say, well, that's the school should have taught them that. No, actually, a lot of these things should come from the home.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Like now,
well, there is the strategy that you know, they're wanting to take, you know, the elite are wanting to take the onus of everything off the family and off the parents, so that the children are no longer under their auspices, and then they're able to control the children more. So, you know, there's this whole destruction of the whole family dynamic and the interaction between the parents and the children. I mean, in Victoria, they were putting in the mailbox leaflets saying that parents could be jailed if they were interfering with their child from 5 years onwards choice of choosing to be transgender. And you know, so they're really taking the responsibility right off the parents and the family situation and putting it into the state or the hands of these higher you know, controllers. So you know,
they're removing everything,
strategy.
aren't they? They're creating a being that is on the surface independent, but is really not independent at all.
No, that's right. And these structures that actually give us security and protection, which is our parents and our family situation, trying to, you know, take that away.
Yeah, very much so. And you can, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because you can see how it's all very clearly fitted into plan. And we talk about now, I mean, David Icke talks about it the whole time, about it's those little decisions that add up and suddenly you realize all your freedoms have gone. And that's what I see with, like what you were just saying, Medyhne, about the 5-year-olds being allowed to choose what gender they are. Well, because as parents, and of course this is all a generalization, everyone, I'm not talking about every single person watching, but parents, when you abstain from these decisions all the way through and expect someone else to take hold of it, and suddenly you realize you've got no control left. And it's been a gradual process over years to get to that state.
This has changed so quickly. I mean, I'm 39. When I was 14 years old, so not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, I will never forget my grandfather, who was the big 6'5", my dad's dad, came to get me from school one day, and we were driving to their house. And in Georgia, you get your learner's permit at 15, you get your driver's license at 16. Well, I was 14. My grandfather pulls his big Lincoln over to the side of the road in the road heading towards his house, and he tells me, get out. So I get out and we change seats. He puts me in the driver's seat. He's like, okay, you drive us home. And I was panicked because I was 14 years old. And my grandfather was like, if you get pulled over, I'm your grandfather. I'm your authority. I'm giving you the permission. And so that generation had this understanding that their children, their grandchildren were there, and nothing happened. I drove us home. He actually took a nap in the seat. I was shaking the whole time. Same thing, same grandfather. He took me out to dinner once when I was probably 14, 15, 16 years old, something like that. The drinking age here in America is 21. Well, he ordered me a cocktail. We were at this restaurant. He ordered me a cocktail, and the waiter kind of looked at my granddad, and my granddad was like, it's okay. I'm her grandfather. I'm going to teach her how to drink responsibly. And I was a teenager, and the waiter, respect my grandfather, brought me the drink, and my grandfather had me sip the drink with him. And that was parents. And I'm not saying that all parents should be, that those might be bad examples, but that idea that my children are my property, my grandchildren are my property. If we've seen this little school system here now, that if some child is struggling in school, the parents will immediately go and scream at the teacher. Well, when I was a kid, if I was struggling or was disrespectful or something happened, my parents disciplined me. You know, and that level of like having respect for, I don't know, it's just it's like they've very strategically removed it, but in a very short amount of time, it seems.
Yeah.
And it takes obviously it takes the responsibility away from the parents in many ways, and it just multiplies that kind of thing when you take responsibility, because a lot of people don't take responsibility, period. So it just multiplies. I think that it causes the flow-on effect of removing such an enormous responsibility from somebody's life, such as bringing up your children or teaching them things. It really has a massive effect in other areas.
Mm.
Yeah.
Good grief. It's a lot. What, remind me why we chose to come onto this planet?
For this discussion.
Yeah. I wonder would they have cats on other planets, you see, and squirrels and all wonderful things like that.
I just want to go to Venus. Next life, Venus.
Hey, can I share a funny story about a cat? There was this friend, they had this cat, and they were looking at a dating site, and the cat put its paw on the screen, and up came this profile of this person on the dating site. So they thought, oh, I'll try them, and they ended up dating this person. They ended up getting married. So it was due to the cat.
Oh,
I love that.
always know best. Don't ever argue with a cat. They're always right.
Yep.
So, well, thank you so much, everyone. So anything else from you, Brice, before we finish?
Just hang in there, guys. I know we were talking about the roller coaster of emotions for everyone. Everything's coming to the surface. It's always darkest before the dawn. And I know I was talking with David Zublik today, divinity has its hand on things. And the probability of us going to fourth density positive is a good one. And so just hold on. Everything's going to be okay. Claim your sovereignty back, and just take it one day. Just know your soul can never die. So just take it one day at a time. And you pick this. You pick this. So here you are.
Medyhne.
I'd love to finish with a little prayer if I could. It's a really uplifting one, and I think it'd be nice to finish with. But I just want to tell people too, if anyone would like to have a session with me, I'm open for sessions at the minute. I have more availability in my schedule from mid-March, and you can also get a 10% discount if you contact me and mention the show. So if anyone would like to have a session, the sessions basically read people's energy fields and help them shift anything that's not serving them anymore. And that we are accumulating a lot of stuff at the minute as we go through this process, so it's really good to empty out the wardrobe and do the feng shui and just clear your own energy so that you can deal with everything that's happening in your reality at the minute.
Great. Well, yeah, please do him with a prayer. And thank you. I don't
you.
disturb everyone. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for Idris for letting me back on. And thank you so much for everyone who's watching and joining in this conversation. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. I'll just share the prayer here. It's really lovely. Can you see that one?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. So it's called the Prayer for Tranquility. May the everlasting light shine on tranquility, for there is a journey to behold. When all is pure, he who shall come shall know all with an everlasting love for all mankind. In God's holy name, amen. And I'm not religious, but I just do feel these prayers have a beautiful frequency or energy that just lifts us up. And so, we can utilize these types of tools as well to keep us in a high, state at the moment. So, yeah. Thank you
so much, everyone. It's so lovely to connect, and we will see you all again in 2 weeks' time. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Bye.
Thank you so much.